Chapter 1. The Imperial Fleet and the Shocking Skyline. For many long centuries, the desolate northern border of the Great Ming Dynasty was known across the realm for nothing but lawless wilderness, frozen muddy terrain, and broken outcasts. It was a place where traditional wooden imperial outposts stood weak, rotting against the unforgiving elements, and where starvation was a daily, painful reality for exiled criminals and disgraced families. To the arrogant imperial court back in the distant capital, this entire frontier was treated as a geographical trash heap. It was considered a historical mistake where unwanted people went to fade away, suffer, and ultimately die under the heavy, gray freezing skies. The ministers never spoke of it, the generals never sent reinforcements, and the realm map simply marked it as an empty zone of desolation. But on this fateful, misty morning, the ancient, rigid laws of geography, history, and empire were completely and utterly shattered. The heavy, freezing sea fog hanging over the ocean waves suddenly began to roll back like a curtain, revealing a literal miracle of modern engineering rising directly out of the deep, choppy water. On this remote, supposedly dead frontier, an impossible fortress city of steel, concrete, and brilliant light had materialized, completely shifting the very concept of human architecture. The coastlines were no longer lined with rotting wooden posts, unstable stone masonry, or crumbling muddy banks that washed away with every tide. Instead, they were fully reinforced with colossal, interlocking concrete block barriers that stood unyielding against the smashing waves. Above these barriers, a massive, multi-lane modern highway system made of perfectly poured dark asphalt ran straight from the water's edge, winding deep into the interior of the island. The high-ranking royal officials standing on the deck of the leading imperial flagship gasped in absolute unison, their faces twisting with deep confusion. They clutched their decorative wooden railings so tightly that their knuckles turned completely white, and their hands began to shake violently against the wood. Their eyes bulged out of their sockets as they stared into the distance, completely unable to process the visual reality before them. They weren't looking at traditional wooden vessels with cloth sails and rows of sweating rowers. Moving flawlessly through the rough, crashing waves were massive, ironclad warships powered purely by roaring steam engines, cutting through the heavy water with terrifying speed without needing a single gust of wind. Minister Yang Rong, his face completely pale and covered in beads of cold sweat, stumbled backward across the wooden deck. He nearly tripped over his own long silk official robes as he looked through his heavy brass imperial spyglass. He rubbed his eyes repeatedly, blinking against the salt air, completely convinced that he had been struck by a sudden, severe delusion or a curse from the sea spirits. He simply could not accept that what he was looking at was real. He staggered back up to the front of the ship, his voice cracking into a panicked, high-pitched scream that echoed across the quiet water. He cried out, "Your Imperial Majesty. Look ahead. Please tell me my eyes are playing tricks on me. This violates every map, every historical scroll, and every census in our Imperial archive. The official records explicitly state that Gongju Island is a barren swamp, a land of mud, poverty, and sudden death. But those structures over there, they are towering over the clouds. They are higher, grander, and more terrifying than the supreme palace walls inside our own Imperial capital. How can this be? Who could have built this without our spies noticing?" Emperor Zudi did not move a single inch. He stood completely rigid at the bow of his grand ship, his heavy hand gripping the golden hilt of his imperial sword with such crushing force that his forearm muscles locked into place. His brilliant, calculating military mind was experiencing a profound structural fracture. He had spent his entire life building the most powerful military empire on Earth through bloody campaigns, ruthless political maneuvers, and absolute tactical dominance on the battlefield. Yet, the sheer technological marvel operating on this tiny, forgotten island made his entire imperial fleet look like a collection of primitive, childish wooden toys. The emperor narrowed his eyes, his deep, rumbling voice booming with absolute authority over the sound of the crashing waves and the roaring wind. He commanded, "Silence your pathetic screaming, Yang Rong. Do you take me for a blind fool? I can see the iron walls clearly. I can hear the strange roar of the engines vibrating through the water hull. My eyes do not deceive me. Tell the helmsman to accelerate our vessels immediately. I want our ships to move at their maximum speed. I want to arrive at those docks. I want to see exactly what kind of ungodly monster has taken control of my frontier, right under my nose." To truly understand how this impossible reality came to be, we have to look back at the most dangerous, cutthroat arena on the face of the earth, the royal court of the Great Ming Dynasty. Emperor Zudi had multiple sons, all of them fiercely competitive, power-hungry, and constantly plotting behind closed doors to inherit the dragon throne. They gathered factions, bribed generals, and manipulated ministers just to secure a single step closer to ultimate power. But then, there was his fourth son, Prince Zhu Gang. The entire court, from the highest-ranking prime ministers down to the lowest palace kitchen servants, openly mocked Zhu Gang as a weak, incredibly lazy, and completely useless human being. While his older brothers spent every waking hour mastering complex martial arts, studying intense ancient military philosophy, and building corrupt political alliances with greedy borders generals, Zhu Gang showed absolutely zero interest in palace politics. He deliberately stayed away from the throne room, acting as though he only wanted to live a simple, boring, completely stable life away from the chaos of the family. Years ago, while sitting in a dusty, quiet corner of the royal library, his older brothers had cornered him like a pack of wolves. Prince Zhu Gaoshu had stepped forward arrogantly, kicking Zhu Gang's wooden writing desk with his heavy leather boot, sending his books, papers, and inkwells flying across the cold stone floor. Zhu Gaoshu had laughed loudly, his mocking voice echoing through the stone arches of the library as he said, "Look at our pathetic fourth brother. Look at the future prince of the Great Ming Dynasty. While the rest of us are out in the courtyard preparing to lead imperial armies to secure the frontiers of the crown, he is hiding in the shadows like a dirty rat, playing with wooden blocks and drawing meaningless scribbles on scrap paper. You are a complete embarrassment to the imperial bloodline, Zhu Gang. You don't deserve to carry the name of our father." Zhu Gang did not fight back against the direct insult. He didn't even show a single spark of anger or resentment in his eyes. He simply knelt down on the cold floor, carefully picked up his scattered papers one by one, bowed his head humbly toward his arrogant brother, and muttered in a soft, trembling voice, "Second brother speaks the absolute truth. I have no talent for leadership, court. politics, or military strategy. I am weak and foolish. I only wish to live a quiet, peaceful life where I do not cause any trouble or burden for the family. But behind that humble bow and submissive voice, Zhu Gang was laughing hysterically inside his mind. He wasn't weak at all. He was a brilliant, transmigrated genius holding a cosmic secret that no one in this medieval world could possibly comprehend. In a primitive reality restricted by ancient laws and crude hand tools, he alone possessed a hidden, digital interface known as the National Prosperity System, focused entirely on advanced modern science and heavy industrial technology. At that exact moment, a crisp, mechanical prompt had chimed directly inside his brain, flashing in red text: "Warning. Imperial spies are actively monitoring your heart rate, pulse, and facial expressions. Maintain your low-profile persona to safely accumulate system points and unlock the Tier 1 industrial base blueprints." Zhu Gang knew that staying in the capital meant his ambitious brothers would eventually see him as a potential threat and assassinate him. He needed an escape route. He needed a place far away from the palace walls where he could build his technology in absolute secrecy. So, he deliberately played the role of a useless, lazy fool, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to be pushed out of the empire by his own father. That perfect opportunity finally arrived when the emperor, completely exhausted and fed up with his fourth son's drive, officially ordered his exile. He stripped Zhu Gang of his capital privileges, cut his allowance, and sent him to the absolute worst, most dangerous territory under Ming control, the remote, isolated shores of Gongju Island. The entire royal court celebrated and laughed behind his back, fully believing that the weak prince would either starve to death in the winter cold or be brutally executed by the local rebels within his first month on the island. After all, Gongju Island was a frozen, lawless strip of land surrounded by treacherous ocean currents. It was highly volatile, torn apart by a bloody, century-long ethnic conflict between the native Qiongdi tribes and the incoming frontier settlers. Every previous governor had used pure military force to try and control the population, which only resulted in endless bloody rebellions, burned villages, and a total economic collapse. But the moment Zhu Gang's boots hit the thick mud of Gongju Island 3 years ago, a massive smile spread across his face. He looked at the desolate landscape and realized he was finally free from the watchful eyes of the Imperial secret police. He immediately opened his digital system menu and initiated his master plan for rapid, aggressive modernization. He didn't waste resources building lavish palaces, gardens, or monuments. He focused entirely on heavy industry, steel production, and basic infrastructure. Now, jump back to the present day. Emperor Zhu Di's grand flagship was slowing down as it approached the massive, towering steel harbor gates of Gongju Island. The reflection of bright, humming electric streetlights danced across the dark sea water, illuminating the ships in an eerie, otherworldly glow that felt completely unnatural to the year 1200. Crown Prince Zhu Zanji ran up to the emperor's side at the railing, his breath hitching in his throat as he pointed at the glowing shoreline in sheer, unadulterated panic. He yelled, "Father, look at those lights on the shore. Those aren't fire torches. They are glowing with an unnatural intensity, like artificial stars fixed onto tall metal poles. And look at the harbor entrance. Those gates are made of solid, unyielding iron plates. This is terrifying. How could a broken, bankrupt exile afford this kind of construction? Father, our fourth brother has been lying to us for years. He is secretly plotting a massive, heretical rebellion against the dragon throne." Prince Zhu Gaoshu joined them at the bow, his face twisted in a mixture of intense rage and bitter jealousy. He slammed his armored fist against the ship's wooden railing, shattering a piece of the trim as he shouted, "He must have made a secret deal with enemy foreign kingdoms. Or perhaps he is practicing forbidden, demonic sorcery to summon these structures out of the sea. Father, give me the command. Let me take the vanguard forces, storm the harbor, and breach those iron gates. We must execute this traitor before he can march his heretical forces toward our capital." Emperor Zhu Di did not answer his screaming sons immediately. He stood completely still, watching as his massive flagship glided smoothly into the calm, deep, engineered waters of the harbor. Rising directly out of the ocean was a grand, towering metropolis made entirely of steel, reinforced stone, and glowing electronic lights. The primitive, muddy frontier he remembered had completely vanished from existence. In its place stood an industrial superpower that defied every single political and physical rule of the medieval era. The emperor slowly raised his hand, silencing his son's frantic shouting with a single, absolute gesture. He let out a long, heavy breath, his voice laced with profound awe and chilling political dread as he spoke to his sons. "Look closely at the architecture of those towers," the emperor whispered, his eyes wide. "Look at how those iron ships move smoothly across the waves without a single cloth sail or a single piece of wood. If your fourth brother wanted to rebel against my throne, he wouldn't need a secret, hidden plot. With this kind of terrifying power, he could have marched into our capital and taken my crown in a single afternoon. Helmsman, drop the anchors immediately. We are going ashore to meet my son, and absolutely nobody draws a weapon unless I give the explicit command to fire." Chapter 2. The Arrival, the Iron Road, and the Forbidden Tech. The heavy wooden planks of the Imperial flagship groaned loudly as they pressed against the harbor wall. But this was no standard harbor. There were no rotting wooden poles slipping into the water. There was no unstable stone masonry collapsing under the weight of the tides. The ship came to a perfectly smooth stop against a dark gray vertical cliff of artificial stone. Emperor Zhu Di stepped forward to the absolute edge of the deck, his cold, piercing eyes locked onto the ground below. His leather boot met the surface with a solid, echoing thud. The ground was perfectly flat. It was completely seamless. It extended for miles along the coastline, curving into the horizon. Zhu Di slowly bent down, his long imperial robe sweeping across the pristine floor. He pressed his bare palm directly against the stone. It wasn't natural rock carved from a quarry. It wasn't standard clay baked in a kiln. It was dense, high-grade engineering concrete. It was a material completely unknown to the traditional builders of the Ming capital. Behind him, Crown Prince Zhu Zanji and Prince Zhu Gaoshu stepped off the wooden ramp. Their faces instantly lost all color as their boots hit the unnatural ground. The royal advisors hurriedly pulled out their official imperial maps, checking the red seal coordinates over and over again in a panic. According to every court record, Gongju Island was supposed to be a barren wasteland. It was supposed to be a place of mud, filth, and starving, exiled outcasts. Instead, they were standing on an industrial foundation that could withstand a full naval bombardment without taking a single scratch. While the emperor was processing the sheer density of the concrete harbor, a sudden, sharp laugh cut through the salt air. A local man was sitting casually on top of a heavy iron shipping crate nearby, swinging his legs back and forth. He wore simple, durable work clothes made of a thick, woven blue fabric. His face was clean and healthy. He didn't look starved, thin, or broken by hard labor. He looked at the lavish silks, the golden embroidery, and the terrified expressions of the royal advisors, and he shook his head in amusement. The stranger chuckled softly and muttered aloud, "Look at these country bumpkins. It's like they've never stepped foot in a real city before. Look how they stare at the pavement." The words hit the royal retinue like an absolute thunderbolt. In the capital, speaking to the imperial family without dropping your face into the dirt meant immediate execution. The royal bodyguards instantly drew their swords. The sound of sharp steel ringing filled the air as they lunged forward, pointing their blades directly at the worker's throat. They demanded his name. They demanded his absolute submission. But the man didn't even flinch. He just stared at the sharp tips of the swords with